So first of all, I'd like to thank PFU for inviting me to hold this panel discussions about RPA, as well as your interest in this session. Now, RPA, is there somebody that can tell me what RPA stands for as an abbreviation? One of you? Robotic Process Automation. Now, some people also say repetitive process automation or rules-based or routine-based process automation. The interesting thing is that this market is growing like hell at the moment. A market which is from now until the year 2025 supposed to be growing 30%, depends obviously year by year, to grow up to $5 to $6 billion globally. For a market which about 3-4 years ago was just at $500 million. And the good news is this market needs capture. Capture why? To intelligently extract content, like we just heard it from Abby, from documents that they now need. Now, I guess a lot of you may not be using, but you may ask yourself, how can I get started in RPA? Well, this is what this panel discussion is about. You basically learn from experts of the industry, what does it mean? What is a typical RPA deal size? Where the customer? How do I become an integrator? What are the hurdles to overcome when I'm in front of a customer? So we have especially experts here. But before I introduce them to you, I wanted to ask who of you is actually already offering RPA solutions to your customers. Can you just raise your hand, please? So one, no. Let me guess, this is 5% of people here. That's quite low. And it just shows how important it is to be at this panel discussion today, as you can learn something about that. And can I ask from the ones that just have been raising your hand, ask 1 or 2 volunteers, what is your definition of RPA, and what has your company been doing in RPA? Any volunteer from the people here? No volunteer, you're all afraid. Okay. Oh, we have somebody. Thank you.
Actually, the challenge was just mentioned by James over here, the integration with legacy applications. We have projects where we have to integrate with SAP, and we don't have any expertise in this field, so we hired a robot, basically. So any repetitive action can be easily automated by RPA. We use more than one supplier, and most of the implementations we had related to integration.
Yeah, made it much easier, obviously. Anybody else as a volunteer? Behind you? Yeah. Thank you. That's very kind of you.
We have some challenge too with the final customers we have, is that they don't really know their own process, how they have to do it. So they have repetitive tasks, but they don't know how to tell you how you have to do that with the robot. So most of the time it's not the problem, the delivery, it's the previous phases to find which tasks you have to do RPA, how you have to write it, what you have to do, and at the end, the operation is quite important, the operation too. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So we will hear more about this now during the panel discussion, and for this we have a fantastic group of 4 industry experts, each of them coming from different companies, from different backgrounds, and I think this diversity will also contribute to have really interesting discussion. Each of them will share with us on how they see RPA in their environment. And for this, I would like to introduce you to them. Is there something where I can press the button, maybe, for the presentation? Is it over there? Okay, sorry, I didn't. Good, so I have that finally. So I'd like to introduce you to them by bringing them up on stage one by one. And the first gentleman I'd like to bring on board is a gentleman who has been working in senior executive roles for companies such as Google and Amazon. And since 2016, he has been building up very successfully the European operation of the leading RPA vendor, Automation Anywhere, where he works today as the Vice President and Digital Worker Evangelist. So I'd like to welcome on board James Stanning, please. We're thrilled to have you here on board. So next person I'd like to welcome aboard is a gentleman who also has worked in senior executive roles in various companies from Atos, Accenture, Infosys, and he has been leading the product roadmap, vision, and integration design for artificial intelligence as well as robotic process automation for the leading RPA vendor UiPath. And where he works today as the Global Vice President of Automation Innovations. May I please welcome on board Boris Crumray. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So as you can see, here we have extremely a lot of RPA experience on that side now. I will sit in the mid, and now we introduce the next person, which is a gentleman who has a lot of experience on the capture side, such as you, as well as the information management market space, where he has been working in senior executive roles, ranging from product marketing up to managing whole global business units for the market-leading capture vendor, as we just heard at Abby, where he is today the Vice President and Head of Sales. So please welcome on board Markus Pichler. Great to have you with us, Markus.
Thanks a lot.
So next person I will come on stage is a gentleman who actually has a lot of experience from integrating, implementing, and deploying different RPA platforms, technologies, also the ones from UiPath as well as from Automation Anywhere. And he works actually for Fujitsu, but on the integration side here in the DACH region, where he works as competence lead of automation. Please welcome on board Philipp Küller. Wonderful to be here. So thank you, gentlemen, for making this long journey. Actually, Markus just arrived about 30 minutes ago. And so we have just heard a few definitions, what companies have done here as integrators with RPA. But in order to find some general understanding and for the rest of the discussion, may I just ask you, the experts, to start, what is your definition and description of robotic process automation? Because you're the expert. May I just start with you, James, please?
So I think it's changed. You know, if you had asked me a couple of years ago, what is RPA? You know, robotic process automation, there's a fairly good understanding, I think, of what that is. It's rules-based. You know, if this, then that. It enables you to automate things that are, you know, repetitive in their nature. But then as time went on, and we found that dealing with that structured data, that low-hanging fruit, you know, that worked to a certain extent. But as there were more and more use cases where there was semi-structured data and unstructured data, and document capture in general is a great example of that, we started to hear new terminology. You know, the combination of RPA with artificial intelligence, with machine learning, as James talked about earlier. Over the last couple of years, we've heard about intelligent automation, we've heard about hyper-automation, automating everything. And I think now, if you talk about RPA, you're not just talking about that rules-based automation. I think you're talking about a much broader church. You're talking about rules-based automation, you're talking about intelligent automation as well, artificial intelligence, machine learning. I think you're talking about real-time analytics. I think you're talking about marketplaces for automations. So there's a very broad church. When people say to me, tell me about your business, and I say we're an RPA vendor, I mean that broad church of structured data handling, of unstructured, semi-structured data handling with artificial intelligence, machine learning, real-time analytics, all of it.
Okay, thank you. Boris, would you like to add something to us, maybe also from a technology platform, a module point of view?
Yeah, so in principle, James is right. So RPA has basically morphed more and more into embedding more and more, technologies like AI technologies, but also other technologies. So this is where probably the term hyper-automation will be quite interesting to explore a little bit more. But the core of it is like the core in your business, OCR, right? The OCR engine is still with RPA. It's a software robot that imitates what the user is doing on his computer. And what we're doing is actually we're making the eyes and the hands of this software robot more and more intelligent. We're adding the capability of understanding, the documents humans produce and combine that into the entire end-to-end workflow. So we come from a process area, but when we originally the RPA world where they started from was really more like intelligent screen scraping, and then realizing that it comes to a much better capability, and hence to the point where you are able to screen scrape intelligently in a sense of being able to ensure that whenever you change something, the robot doesn't fail, right? So as soon as that level was reached, we actually had RPA more or less born.
Yes. Thank you. Would you like to add something to it, or?
Yeah, I think both said fairly that what the heart of RPA is, especially this human imitation, which makes it quite easy to integrate with the different applications. So, and what I have learned in the past, and it was very surprising for me, I had technical guys from the SAP area, and they said to me, "Oh, we take RPA because it's easier for us." And I asked, "Why is it easier for us? You can use the API to do it." And the answer was because it's so wide variety of data fields available in SAP, and we only need such small bunch of fields where we have to enter data. So it's more effort for us to go through this API instead of going directly the way the user does it. And so it's completely a new way of integration systems. And I think that's also a very important thing for us as an integrator, not only to see what is with legacy application and so on, but also what could be done easier in the future.
Okay, thank you. So then let's move on, or unless you want to.
Yeah, let me just comment a little bit as well. I mean, we have seen the emergence of RPA 3 years ago. I remember when we were sitting in London, right?
Yeah.
In our small office. So ABI was, I would say, one of the first vendors who realized that, and we have basically set up partnerships in the RPA area. I mean, automation, we have done automation for quite some years when it comes to documents, right? So for us, RPA is a really big market opportunity, yeah? And that is what changed the whole capture area, yeah, into a more of intelligent automation area. So we are aligning with a lot of RPA vendors in order to drive business. Yeah? So from our side, it's a very interesting area to work together.
And I guess most people here actually, as we have seen, we have probably 5% who are currently already offering RPA. Now, but a lot of you, as Markus just said, you're very familiar with automation technology, very close to capture, BPM, for example, business process or management automation. But in the word RPA, you have also the process automation. Now, I'd be very interesting for our audience to hear what's the big difference from a technology point of view or between these technologies? Where would you draw the line? Can you combine them? Or where does it not make sense? Maybe you can start on that.
Sure, I can start on this. So the very basic difference is that BPM systems are designed to use APIs. So if you don't have an API, you can't build a workflow on top of it. So whereas our RPA technologies, they do UI automation as well as API. And actually we are kind of, now we're even on the level that we can build very complex, long-running workflows. And so it's a bit kind of, we're moving more and more into the BPM space as well. And so that's also something that you can see as an evolvement. But the big difference is BPM would depend on APIs.
Yeah, okay. You, James?
I think Boris is right, but I'd also look at it in a very different prism. That a lot of BPM projects are designed to look at processes and optimize them. To say, well, here's a business outcome that we need, and we want to find the most efficient process to do that. Now, RPA can do that actually quite differently. Rather than optimizing the process, you can optimize the process. Or you can just say, you know what, we've got a process and we're not very happy with it. And the reason why people are unhappy with processes is typically there are two reasons. One is it doesn't deliver the right business outcome. You have a payroll process and half your workforce don't get paid on time. And those problems tend to get fixed very, very quickly because you need that business output. The other way that a process is poor, is broken, is it's inefficient. got a process and it takes you 5 people full-time to operate it. Now, if you replace those 5 people, yeah, and let them go off and do something more valuable for the business, and you replaced 5 full FTEs with robotics that cost you a few $1,000s a year, do you care if that process is inefficient and long-winded? Do you want to take the time and effort to rebuild that process and optimize it? Perhaps you don't, because you're now getting this business outcome you need, but you're getting it maybe for 10% of the cost. So BPM is a great thing, and you should do it, and you should look at your process and seek to optimize them. But sometimes, you know what, you can just throw cheap CPUs, you can throw cheap computer power at a problem and fix it through brute force and leave that problem for another day to solve.
Yeah. From your perspective of capture or implementation?
And what we have seen, if I can start first, what we have seen is that, agreed to everything what you both said. Of course, we have seen that the implementation of these RPA tools moves out of the IT department, right? So you've seen that a lot of organizations have implemented centers of excellence, where this whole RPA use cases are implemented, lay it into the hands of different people, not necessarily the IT department. So that makes it easier, simpler to use, and that's also what I think helps to promote that in the market.
Yes. Philippe, you wanted to?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to add something which going a little bit in a different direction, but if you are all enough to see what we are doing in the last 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, we do automation. We build ERP systems, we build CRM systems. Everything is automation, more or less. But what we did not was a proper integration. So today we are thinking about different microservices integrated in big tools and building up new workflows in a completely new way. But this fancy-looking cupcake is still far away. And I like this in the first presentation after lunch. We are not there. We will need 10, 20, 30 years to come to such a situation where RPA is not longer used, or where BPM is not longer this case, or also scanning might be disappear. But we are not here. So I think we are absolutely bridging this gap with a new kind of technology, and we are also doing it in a way that an end user can do it. And that makes a big difference to all the other automation things we had, because in the past only developers were able to use automation tools. So they have been designed in a backend system. They have been done with coding, with scripting, and nowadays we can do it with drag and drop more or less, and it's easy to understand. And that's a new kind of value we give to the end user and also to power users.
Thank you. I think you're actually addressing one of the key points. It's easy to use, faster to implement, what James also alluded to. But when you think about it, the key thing is when BPM was coming up, people were very strongly believing in API management as the future, and you had all these IT departments that were saying, yeah, we can cover this, superb, easy. And then people in the business realized it's not happening. It's just very slow. Of course, it's slow because it's a scale. It's looking after many systems, but still. So what our customers are telling us, it is very difficult to take people out of the business, have them talk about a process and transforming the process that will happen some half year or whatever, which just has a very big scope, and it goes on and on. Then talking about a process you can tackle right now, or even parts of it, automated, and then actually that they realize whilst they're doing this, they realize, oh, actually now I know how the new process should be transformed in a much more efficient way. So that also kind of worked to the benefit of RPA.
It's pretty interesting. Unless I move to the next question. So RPA, you can really, everybody speaks about RPA when you look into IT magazines or on the internet, you can read RPA actually quite a lot. But if I look really in companies that are using it, there's still a lot of companies that are not using it yet. And so I'd like to know who are actually the early adopters in RPA? In which industries is it being used predominantly? And where's the low-hanging fruit?
So I think the early adopters were, I think for us, for UiPath, for everyone, was banking, financial services, insurance. Why? Because there's a lot of numbers there. You know, so a lot of transactions, a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of bulk processing. But I would actually challenge the statement that there are a lot of companies who aren't using it. I think pretty much you go through, whether it's, whatever big, whether it's the FTSE or the, the Nikkei or whatever, go through the biggest companies in the world. Everyone's doing RPA, but the problem is people aren't doing it enterprise-wide. People aren't doing it at scale. There are little projects here and there where you've got a brave manager who said, you know what, I found this thing. It really can transform my part of the business. Because RPA, automation at its best, is transformative. But things, by definition, are only transformative when you do them on a very wide scale. You automate 3 processes, you save your business, $300,000 a year. Frankly, no one cares. You automate 500 processes, 1,000 processes. You save your business 10, 20, 30, 50, $100 million a year. And there are companies doing that. Go and look at the likes of Citibank, JP Morgan, Novartis, BP. These are companies doing major rollouts of automation technology using the major vendors. Those companies now starting to use capture. Abby, we use your technology in our product. We're very pleased with it. They're using things like that. So people are doing it. The problem has really been around how do we help these companies scale? And I think what we're now seeing, certainly this year, for the next couple of years, we're starting to see much better customer success management. We're starting to see university programs providing the automation engineers of the future. We're seeing automation marketplaces, always better to buy rather than to build. And RPA has always been about pragmatic development. What Boris said just now, rather than using an API, which might take you weeks or months to build a link between 2 pieces of software, you do it at user interface level, you can do it in days. So having that pragmatic approach, all those things that go around the core product to help people scale up their automations, that's what we're going to see this year and for the next couple of years.
Scale is James is right. So scale is one of the biggest major challenges. But it's not just depending on purely technology, it's depending on the change management around it. So if you're introducing to optimize entire end-to-end process, well, you have to prepare people. You have to tell them this is upcoming, this is how your work is going to change. They need to understand what's in it for them and so forth. And so this is why in our product range we also look at, besides of automation itself, what can we build like a portal where people can raise ideas and it actually guides you to the final deployment. So our focus has really expanded, and that's why we're beating always on this term of hyper automation, of including many other technologies, but also looking at what's the wider holistic picture of kind of tackling scale. So scale, is kind of the key point.
And there's a virtuous circle with every successful public implementation. Other companies look at it and go, hang on, why aren't we doing that? And that's been very slow, I think, for everyone. People have been reticent on showing their success to their competitors. But every week, every month, every year, we see more and more successful, significant scaled examples, use cases, and that can only be a good thing for everyone else.
So we have heard the vendor side of that. How does it look on the capture and integrator side? Which industries have you, for example, with your customers, seen first, and where have you made your first opportunities?
It's absolutely matching with your first sentence. It was banking and finance industry, insurance companies, leasing companies, and such things. But also in our so-called private sector, so transportation is interesting, and also manufacturing. But the most companies are more on the larger size level. So smaller companies are not so in this early adapter phase. I think the biggest ones are all playing with RPA more or less on a good or practical way. We often see the point Boris said, and we have discussed it during our lunch already. The scaling is one of the biggest problem. And we often see companies starting with 1, 2, 3, up to 5 bots. That works fine. And you need to know a bot can handle lots of processes. So with one bot you can have, for example, 10 processes, or you could talk about 50 processes running, and you are not major RPA installation, it's just a small piece. But then going up to 100 bots, 2,000 bots, that is a big challenge, because then you are talking about completely new way of working. And think about a robot like a human. If a human comes to your office the first day, you have to provide him with credentials, you have to give him an office, you have to give him access to all the applications, you have to train it, and so on. And everything what happens with a human happens also to a bot. So if there's a change, for example, you change your office to a newer version, you might have to retrain your bot. It's a very similar way you do it with your human worker, and that needs to be in an operating model. There needs changes, there needs adaptations, there need, of course, governance, compliance topics. So it's not only putting a new piece of software somewhere in the corner in the data center, it's more or less a change process of the whole company, and especially setting up a kind of a center of excellence and such things. And that's challenging. So that is one aspect which needs to be considered.
Thank you, Philip. Markus, from the capture point of view that you have, the industry and the opportunities that you have started.
So agreed. Basically, it's the big enterprises. They all are using RPA, and across all industries. I mean, we have also seen banking, finance, insurance, pharmaceutical, healthcare. So you name it. So from that side, it's really different. What we also have seen, and that's quite interesting. If you talk to big enterprises where one of the RPA vendors has implemented an RPA solution, most of them have already capture. Okay, so most of them have a capture process already implemented. They have specific teams who are working on capturing data. But due to that new RPA initiative, we see completely new areas and budgets in an organization coming up where they are, even if a competitor is in that customer, they are coming to us and trying to basically implement a solution based on EBI. And we are, of course, working hard to get as many enterprise customers, as the guys over there have. We're in a good way, but still, in terms of the adoption and the opportunity, it's the big enterprises.
But continuing with you maybe on these opportunities. 1 second, we have here, 1 second, all the adapters. So I'd like to know, what are the general use cases now, to be more specific? Would this be invoice, or can you give us some example, especially out of the area of capture? I'd like to start maybe from the others.
Well, in the beginning, I think, Boris, you mentioned that, and you as well, James, we supplied our OCR technology because there was a need to digitize documents and then implement some rules in order to analyze what's on a document. But soon enough, after the first step was taken, we have seen the need for more intelligent document processing solutions coming up. And surprisingly enough, the most common use case that we come across is invoices. Again, very interesting. We thought that customers have already automated the invoice process, but I would say 70% of the projects that we are doing around RPA is automating the invoice process. And it's also understandable because the invoice process is very, let's say, very standardized. You can set it up very fast. So it comes in line a little bit with the simplification or simple to use message that the RPA vendors bring.
A lot of people here have already integrated invoice. If you now upsell an RPA on top of existing invoice, can you do that? And where does it make it more easy or easier?
So typically, when an organization has already implemented an invoice process, then they would stay with this invoice process, and they can connect to the RPA platforms. But sometimes we get requests from partners to process historical invoice data as well, or handwritten invoices which were not be or which vendors were not be able to process in the past. So with that whole AI and RPA story, we see also a lot of new use cases coming to us where we have the ability to implement our solutions.
Okay. Thank you. Can you mention some specifics, since you have implemented projects, maybe also with capture?
Yeah, I think with capture, the invoice is a typical process, absolutely. Especially then if capturing is not implemented yet. So then it makes sense with RPA, otherwise
Which reconfirms what Marcus said.
Absolutely. The other thing is that there are not only invoices in a company. So orders, for example, the other way around. And that's a process which is typically done today with PDFs, but sometimes scanned PDFs and so on. So there is also some music in this part because it's time critical to get feedback to the customer. Invoice sometimes have a little bit more time, but to confirm an order is quite important thing. On the other side, if you go through your company, you will see so many different RPA topics. Yeah. So it's so easy. You can go to the accounting. You will see the maintenance of cost centers, for example. It's a very easy case. If you go to HR department, you can see the onboarding of people, where you often need also documents in a printed form. And if you go to the production, there are many processes like calculation, like planning. And especially if you go to services, and I see not only IT services, I see also different other services. You have some service management tools, you have service management processes which need to be handled. And often such processes are very high volume processes, but very easy. So for example, a password change is such easy to implement, but if you have to do it 300 times a day, it makes sense to automate it. And so many cases in each and every company which could be automated. And I think the easiest way to find a process is to look on the different criteria which need to be fulfilled.
Yes. Can you give us perhaps some use case scenarios of the real world where capture is being deployed together?
Oh yeah. So invoice processing, purchase order processing, receipt processing, particular defined forms and government areas or insurances, all the same areas. As we see that we're kind of moving very closely together here. And these are kind of typical examples. You would find the benefit of RPA is that you can now actually then extend it to any other process, any other activity that interacts with the applications that you have in your legacy environment. Whereas the workflow environment typically, from a document area, correct me there, would be kind of the data validation and all this kind of, kind of part of the document processing procedure itself. We see simple tasks like the ones that, he suggested, like a list of users to be set up or update the cost centers in SAP, kind of, that's a very kind of like a task automation. But it could be a more complex automation, which would be a typical example, onboarding of a new employee. Okay. So when a new employee comes, you'll have to fill out all this information, but now you can use RPA, fill it out in one form. And some platforms have form generator and design already integrated. So you fill it in, you then submit it, and basically it triggers the payroll setup, it triggers the ordering the badge for the security, ordering the laptop for the employee.
Some very horizontal solutions for any industry.
Absolutely, yeah.
And if we look, because you have said banking finance was kind of the strongest industry with most early adopters, I think I heard mortgage loan processing as one of the use cases. Can you mention perhaps something?
So yeah, I think it was banking and insurance. Those industries were very used to volume processing. Yeah, they're businesses that only really exist at volume. You don't have a bank who's got 3 customers. All banks have lots of customers almost by definition. But I think all the examples given are absolutely right. Whether it's around finance or procurement or HR. But the thing is, what do all those tasks have in common? They're all things where there's no creativity needed. They're all rules-based. And whether it's doing know your customer for mortgage processing or whether it's onboarding somebody, all of those things are relatively easy to automate because you have a fixed set of rules. But the example given earlier of, well, what if somebody's already done an integration around invoice processing? there's a really interesting question there. If you go to any of the new breed of companies, so go and talk to a Netflix or a Facebook or my former employers, Amazon or Google, and if you go to them and say, well, hang on, let's look at the way you do accounts payable or accounts receivable, you'll find that that mindset there is already around automating stuff when you set it up. I used to work for a guy called Sebastian Gunningham. He's now in the news. He's one of the new co-CEOs of WeWork, but he used to be a senior exec at Amazon. And I remember presenting to him, we had a plan to launch a business in the UK, and I said, we're going to do this and this and this, and here we're going to hire 2 people, and he went, stop. Where you're hiring those 2 people, don't. Figure out a way to do it with technology, to automate it. And it's that mindset, and that mindset of the new breed, the challenger companies, you know, like I say, the Facebook, Netflix, the Ubers, the Lyfts, that mindset of automating when you build something in the first place, rather than the legacy approach, and we talked about that gap, you know, of we put in all these different layers of IT, and every time we put in a new layer of IT, we put in Tableau, or we put in some HR Certify or Concur or whatever, and we promise, as I used to run an IT department, we promise to the business it will be perfectly integrated with all the other bits of technology, and that simply isn't true. Is anyone here working in IT, in an IT department, or service IT departments? One person, right, that's not enough to get over the threshold, so I'm going to talk about IT departments. The promise is it'll all be integrated, and it isn't. And what we've done historically is we've thrown people at the problem. We've said these 2 systems don't quite talk to each other. HR onboarding is a great example. So we're going to hire a couple of people, and they're going to take that list of information, give some to facilities management, some to accounts, some to payroll. New companies don't think like that. They automate from the ground up. So the challenge and the danger for all the legacy enterprises out there who are not embracing automation is that you have a very unlevel playing field. Those digital companies who automate first and do people, you know, and think about adding a person to the problem later, that is what you're competing against. And sorry, I've gone slightly off topic, but the point is, unless you're looking to automate all those common use cases, those easy to automate things, those slightly less easy to automate things, your competition will have already automated that, and you will not succeed against them. You'll be Woolworths, you'll be Blockbuster, you'll be the taxi cab, you'll be all of those businesses that are going to vanish because the digital challengers will take over.
Very interesting, thank you. And now that we have heard what RPA is, in which industries it's being used, we have heard some general use case scenarios from you now. I'd be interested, what is actually the typical deal size we are talking about? From what I understood from mostly from you guys, it's today used by larger companies as typical island solutions here and there. But if I'm now an integrator and want to go and talk to them, what do I propose? First one, invoice processing, or do I propose them right away different process to be automated? How scalable is that? Can you perhaps mention that from the capture point of view?
From the capture point of view, yeah. So typically, I mean, the projects are very interesting for us, and we love to basically connect to RPA projects. The typical, let's say, the typical size of these projects, and we have heard that before, there are companies who are automating a lot of their processes, like I think you mentioned BP, Citibank. So from that side, there's a big opportunity. But what we have seen as well is that a lot of companies are starting very small. They're identifying individual processes, and they're trying to automate that. Yeah. So typically, invoice processes between 100 and 500,000 invoices. Yeah, and that is not a very big one. Yeah? So that's a very small one in the beginning. But of course, what we see is when we start with this initial process, then this is going to grow as more robots and more processes are identified. So from that side, there's a big opportunity, but often enough it starts on a smaller scale.
On the time that it takes, we speak later about ROI and so on, but the time that it takes, let's say you start with a smaller invoice, it takes a year till you can sell up the next robots to them?
So between, let's say, 6 and 9 months from our perspective, yeah, it takes until the next project will be basically implemented, and then an upsell takes place.
Okay. Philippe, maybe you want to add something to that as well?
Yeah, he said already that it starts very small, and absolutely agree on that. In the past, there often have been started with proof of concepts. But today I don't like to say we need to do a proof of concept because the concept is proven and it works.
Okay.
But what we often have is a kind of a prototype or a pilot project just to check if a solution is working in the environment of the company. So that's a typical thing. And I think it's more or less a changing of the mindset at this point because they need to understand what is about this new technology. Because it's not so easy to understand than other tools we have because it's more or less it's a kind of it's a framework and you can do different things. And the question about a business case, that's a really good question because you cannot calculate a business case for one process.
Yeah.
That doesn't work in the most cases with RPA. There are seldom some so bad processes which could be automated and running so often that a platform is cheap enough to run such process and to get a positive ROI on such a business case. But typical, you have more processes in the pipeline, and you start with the first ones, and then you get your business case after 1 or 2 years in the shape that it gets a real feedback or positive feedback. But therefore, it's good to start not with the technology, it's good to start with the process. And then you can build your business case in the first steps, kind of a process discovery, process identification. It doesn't need to go on the deepest process level, but just to have the real important numbers like execution time of the human, running or executions per month, per day, whatever. And then you get a good feeling about a process. And if you have a process, it's just a house number, about 300 to 1,000 minutes per month. That's a lower level you should start from our side. If higher, it's quite good, but that makes a business case for us.
So gentlemen, would you agree or disagree? If I'm an integrator, what would make, and now I become a partner of yours, what makes a good first business case to start? Maybe you want to start, Boris?
Okay. Well, you got to see it's actually accessible to all, not just to the big companies, but the big companies do have the scale for a large volume of operations. So this is why, when they see repetitiveness, and everybody starts with cost savings, right? Yeah. That's the first idea they have in mind until they realize that they actually can transform their business, that they can actually, increase their productivity and capacity and so forth. But there are two things that kind of triggered this immense growth, and Gardner was, saying that 36% growth in 2018, the RPA market was, and that probably, Abby has realized that pretty early, that this is a big market. But it's two things that really in this time boosted the RPA vendors, in particular when we kind of introduced the democratization, so free trainings, people can download it, they can use the software product, they can kind of explore it. And then the ease of use. So that's what Philip already alluded to. So it didn't require technical IT people to be, specialized in order to do it. It really was the process owners who could really try. So we grew very much of having those companies where the people in the department just downloaded the software, tried it out themselves and discovered, whoa, I can do it. They went to their management. They said, wow, if you can do it, that must be really something totally we need to invest in. And this is kind of how that came all to that fast movement. So if I'm a small, medium-sized business, I could really kind of get started. I don't need any help. I can really do things. If I'm a large company and the people in the department suddenly realize, wow, I can do this, it's kind of accelerates. But still, when you then come to that point, and that's where scalability was still the topic, you come to that point and say, at some point you need to talk to your IT department who bring that whole thing to, how do you deploy it at large scale? How do you control the processes? Philip was mentioning the COE, Center of Excellence. You have to put some owners there who look after those automations, right? You just can't, just say, here's cool technology, but there's a bit more that you need to do when you have thousands of automations.
So James, would you add something to this as well? Especially, I'm still interested, typical RPA deal sizes?
Honestly, I don't think there is a typical deal size.
Okay, that's
But
an
I'll
honest
give
statement.
you a very personal perspective.
Yeah.
RPA is this incredibly ubiquitous solution, and it really does apply to every vertical, with the possible exception of hedge funds who do 2 transactions a year and are highly bespoke. But whether you're in telco or transport or retail or big pharma, whatever, honestly, RPA can apply to you. And vertically, whether you're a Citibank or whether you're a 200-300 person SME, again, there are benefits. And we had this real problem at Automation Anywhere, and I know this absolutely because I was the first person here in Europe, and we looked at Europe, and Europe's a really big place. Apparently my country left Europe a week ago. I don't know if you read the papers, but anyway, we still consider ourselves European. But we looked at Europe and went, well, who do we go and talk to? And so we had to be very brutal and say, you know what, we've got to cut them. I can't go and talk to 30,000 companies. So I'm literally going to pick the 20 biggest banks, the 20 biggest insurance companies, the 20 biggest farms, and I'm going to go and talk to them, me and my team of 1 at that time. So we started off at the enterprise because that's where, because it was literally a bums on seats problem. Yes. And I think the same thing's true for people like UiPath. I think what's absolutely true now is that we and UiPath, the credible vendors have solutions that work for SMEs. I'm going to do one tiny bit of selling. We've just released A2019 at the end of last year, which is the first cloud-based RPA platform. And a cloud-based platform is great for SMEs because it's extremely easy to deploy and download and all that good stuff. But a good business case, there are the obvious things about cost savings, about being able to redeploy people, about employee morale. You're going to stop them doing really rubbish, boring stuff. But the one thing that people often forget about, and this is with my I've drunk the Jeff Bezos Kool-Aid many years ago, is think about your customers. How is the application of automation technology going to let you provide a better service to your customers? If it reduces your mortgage application processing time from 4 weeks down to 2 weeks, if nothing else changes, it still costs just as much, there's still so much complexity, you haven't freed up any people, but you've done that. Is that a good thing? Yes, absolutely. So a good business case for RPA, does it make you a better provider of services and products to your customers? If the answer is yes, then why aren't you doing it?
Good. Thank you, James. So if I'm a solution provider, an integrator of capture solutions, ECM whatsoever, people that are here today, what does it take to become an RPA integrator? I'm intentionally not starting with the vendors. I'm starting with you first because you have gone through that. You're an integrator of different platforms, actually. What has been your experience also from the investment that you had to be doing?
So I think the question is, what is a good integrator and what is a bad integrator? But I don't want to go on that level. But I need some, let's call it hygienic things you have to do. And this mentioned here, you need certifications. Otherwise, you are not. You get not any footprint in the market if you are not able to show that you can handle RPA. And that's quite easy because all the big vendors have online universities free of charge. And most things are free of charge, where you can go, where you can make trainings, where you can get certified, which is quite easy. And that's also this democratization approach to get people on the RPA topic. But that's only the one side, because the other side is what we have learned, and we have learned it quite hard. You need to understand your customer's business. And that's the first thing. And Fujitsu, we are selling so many hardware devices and such things. So our sales is not able to sell services. Okay. So we have to change the approach to address the market. That must
commercial training is very important. And
not only commercial training, getting on the business process level of customers, and going outside from the IT department to the business department. And changing that mindset helps us to get deeper into the customers and to change the way we address the topic. And that helps us. And of course, you need to do many things besides, because as an integrator, the expectation is not that you can only develop a bot and then hand it over and you go and everything afterwards is on the customer side. On a system integrator's page, you should also be able to handle a platform. You should be able to handle change management, which is quite important, to support the whole life cycle of RPA. Okay. And that makes it important from my perspective. And I think the commercial investment is, of course, you need time, you have working hours to go to such a level, but it's not the commercial investment that you have to build up huge platforms and such things.
Okay, thanks. Markus, how do you have a lot of your channel company, obviously, and how do you help your channel partners to get into RPA?
We're trying to. Yeah. If you would have visited our conferences in the past 2 years, you would see a lot of RPA vendors having presented there. Yeah. Because of course, I think everybody understands that there's a need for looking into this RPA topic. I mean, if you look at how many RPA partners, so partners that are only focusing on the RPA area, we have basically one over the last 2 years. It's massive. Yeah? And then it comes to also our problem a little bit, because the democratization of education and training, which they are doing very well, we need to add a bit on our side, because of course, if you have a new RPA partner that is a knowledge expert and knows RPA technology, and suddenly they need to sell capture, or they want to sell capture because they understand they need to have a solution which extracts data from documents, then we have to implement our knowledge sharing, and we have certification, we have training. But this is the biggest challenge. But what we have is we have a lot of capture partners that know the capture area very, very well. And we try from time to time to plug in these capture partners to help implementing these projects, because knowledge is important for us.
Thank you. And now, as vendors, what do you do? You obviously have channel partners. How do you help onboarding new channel partners with special support, training, certification?
There are training programs and certification and so forth, but there's also a lot of what can we do from a vendor specific, from a technology to support this, right? So, as I mentioned, if you offer, besides of just the automation core, also a portal to kind of manage the end-to-end process until deployment. If you're looking at how to even apply automating the automations and test automation around it. So the whole holistic picture that comes, which tackles scale, that's something that definitely supports most of the partners. Yeah. And just coming back to what we had, the keynote this morning, from Mr. Massini, is basically saying, you'll be successful in sales if you have more domain knowledge. And that's exactly what, we know from our area, the domain knowledge around the process and how relevant this is. That's kind of the key that's now coming also into the capture area.
Yeah. James?
So I think you can go even further than that. I mentioned briefly earlier marketplaces for automations. Providing marketplaces where integrators can build automations and then make them available across a very wide range of our existing customers. I think that's a great way that we or as a vendor can help the integrator. But going back to the original question, yes, I think the table stakes of providing certification and training and all that stuff's obvious. But for me, what I really look for in a great partner is you've got to invest some time. You've got to really understand how the technology works. You've got to be able to talk compellingly about what is a new category of software. And that's often a big challenge because it's a very new thing and you're talking to people who also don't understand it. So really understanding what are the possibilities around automation is very important. Putting in the time to actually have people trained up to be able to use those platforms properly is very important. But for me, one of the biggest things is around alignment. As vendors, we tend to be very aligned in terms of what succeeds for us, in what succeeds for our customers. If, as someone using automation, the more automations you have, on the whole, the more return on investment you'll be getting from your automation project. Show me somebody who's got 3 automations, they probably won't be getting as much benefit as someone like Citibank who has thousands of automations. And the way our commercial models work, the more automations you have, the more we get paid. Great, we're aligned with our customers. Where I've seen projects fail are where integrators are not aligned with that business model. And I've seen projects fail because the integrators were only interested in extracting as many €1,400 a day rates as they could, and they didn't care about actually how many automations came out at the end of the day. So if you're trying to extract as much money as you can for bums on seats, for consultants' time, that's actually diametrically opposed to the whole essence of RPA, which is it's very quick, it's very pragmatic, you can get very quickly to return on investment. So a great integrator for me is one that understands that alignment and wants to help the customer get to that quick return on investment.
Thank you. So now let's imagine people here, companies get certified, they get trained, they become RPA certified, one of your channel partners. Now the next question would be, how do I identify and find my first opportunity in RPA? And again, I'm asking you first, being the integrator here, would you have found it with help from the vendors themselves, or would you have been looking amongst your existing customer base and then upselling RPA to them? Or was the RPA rather a door opener for new opportunities to new clients?
Everything is right you mentioned.
Oh.
So there are the typical sales ways we already use, like public tenders and such things, which opens doors, but which is a very unsexy way to do it, because it's hard to get in and such things. The most things is on our customer base, to be honest. And of course, we also receive from all our partners questions regarding doing platform management and so on. So there is an exchange in both directions. So not only the RPA vendors sell licenses, also we offer solution services to get RPA running, and so there is a good mixture on both sides. Of course, I've mentioned earlier that we go on this process level. I think that's a new approach, and we have developed different ways of doing it. So, and nowadays we are using RPA as a door opener in a market where we are not so stable as in other markets. And I think that's a good way to come in with a very small investment to talk to customers and to show that we are doing digital products or digital solutions, not only the old stuff.
Okay, thank you. I just see that we are getting closer to the end, but not yet, so we should be shorter from now on, maybe with our answers. What would you see from the capture side again?
Okay, short answer. Yeah, we get a lot of opportunities, mainly due to the partnerships that we have set up with the RPA vendors. They helped us to position AB, but at the same time, we are doing a lot of, or let's put it that way, many projects that we are doing are connected to RPA. Even if we are generating that business ourselves through our own, let's say, activities, I would say 75% of the projects are currently connected to RPA. And therefore, the RPA market is the opportunity that creates business for us.
Good, thanks. And do you help your channel partners identifying?
We do. We not just channel partners, also our customers, in the sense of, this is a key familiar problem. This is the first problem all our customers say, right, we bought into it. Now, where do we start? Mm-hmm. And so we have developed tools around it. You may know we have also acquired a process mining company. Plus, we have a tool that is also already not just recording, but it's generating during the recording the actual code plus the process definition document. Yeah. So you're shortcutting the entire knowledge transfer process by actually producing already that document and capturing that information. And so when you think about it, when you want to kind of tackle a process or find those opportunities, or even if in process mining, you think it's an automation, that's going to work perfectly. But then once you're done the process mining and validated all the variants, you found out you're running down a rabbit hole, it would take much longer. So all those risks you're basically addressing, and this is why we brought these tools into our mix of our product.
Yeah, and from automation anywhere perspective?
Pretty much the same answer. So there's process mining technologies, but actually it's a bit simpler than that. If you've got a finance department or a procurement department or a logistics department or an HR department, there will be opportunities for RPA. It really is as simple as that. Working with partners, I'm a firm believer in, we're a technology company. We're a relatively new technology company compared to, someone like Fujitsu. our partners typically have very long-standing, very deep, well-trusted relationships with all of their customers. We don't. So we can provide technology, they can provide those relationships. There's a great synergy there. Sometimes we will have someone come directly to us, and then we will say we want some help to implement, and we will go through our list of, I think, 1,100 partners and try and find one that's the best fit. But identifying opportunities, I don't think I've ever talked to a company and come out and said, no, there's nothing to automate there, ever. And I've talked to thousands of companies. Yeah.
Oh, he's right, but the point is, if the people are fear of change, they will not open up, and so and getting to those,
which is why we're here today.
So let's imagine I'm now, again, certified integrator. I have identified my first opportunity. What are the next steps? Can you perhaps mention that when you engage with a customer, what are the steps typically from project scoping till the delivery? Maybe also some hurdles that you have to overcome, some challenges that you usually face. I guess there are also politics sometimes playing a big role.
Definitely. So to make it a little bit shorter, there are two different ways of doing it. And one thing is about this overall view where you have to establish RPA, and the other thing is about the project view where you have to go to different phases like a development process. I just want to go on this first process, and we start with an automation inspiration workshop to identify ideas, opportunities, make a first automation together with customers. Then we go in a pilot phase. During this pilot phase, we also address the first governance things, address working council topics, and everything could come up in the first step, but we keep this to a minimum because we don't want to have too much politics at this point. And then after a while, so it takes typically 2-3 weeks, the first automation is ready to run in a pre-production mode, and we leave it running for at least 4 weeks to get data, to see what happens. And then after that time, sometimes it takes longer because we're doing more processes, but typically after this 4 weeks, the customer has a very good understanding how we can use RPA. We can set up the next steps, the roadmap, and we can go in the rollout phase more or less. And that makes it quite easy because in more or less 2 months, you get your first process running in a stable environment. Okay. Of course, it could be shorter. If someone just wants to see it, you can do it in 2 days. But the typical way is about this 2 months to get this first bot in a production environment and to learn how to do it.
Yeah. Can I just add something to that? And it's a plea to all of you. When you start down the automation journey and you decide to do an initial project, and it might be a full production project, or you might call it a pilot or a proof of concept, whatever, the timescales we'll talk about here of setting it up, leaving it, you said 4 weeks, which we do 2, 3, 4 weeks when we do a proof of concept. Please don't run 6-month pilots or 12-month pilots, because there is nothing you will learn in 6 months or 9 months or 12 months, or in one of our customers' cases, after they've done 8 pilots over 3 years. There is nothing you'll learn that you haven't learned after 2 or 3 weeks. Literally nothing. The robot isn't going to change. It's not going to go mad. It's not going to do weird stuff. There is nothing you'll learn. All you'll do is sit there and waste time while your challengers I've talked about are busy making hay. So if you're going to do it, do a proof of concept, spend a few weeks looking at it, smelling it, tasting it, checking it does what it says on the tin, but then just get on with it.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And typically 3 to 6 months is already production time.
Mm-hmm. And how does it, politics in the company, do you usually encounter some? I mean, I'm not saying people are made redundant, but headcount is being reduced and maybe redeployed somewhere else.
Well, that's exactly
and people have to change the ways they work differently. What is usually the...
That's exactly where change management comes into play.
Yeah,
exactly addressing the culture change, preparing people for...
And how long does that take?
Well, it depends how large your program is. So here's one take. So you can either start really a kind of task automation, very simple. That's sometimes people start on that level, which is not the best start. You'll start actually by saying, what's your strategy? What's your vision? Where do you really want to be? What's your business benefit? And so forth. So you're starting top down. However, and we promote both ways, if you can also start bottom up by kind of engaging the person to say, listen, you're going to learn new skills. Yeah, there's training for you. There's something that you can do and learn, and you can automate yourself. Then actually, that is a much higher rate of success of implementing that change because you're engaging everyone. And so the platform, as an RPA platform, needs to promote exactly that kind of development.
Interesting.
I absolutely agree. This hybrid approach, governance from top down and project from bottom up is quite the way we promote also. And to have a nice word which comes very often on such panels is think big, start small, but improve rapidly. And that is, I think, the case for RPA, especially because you need to have this vision for your business case and such things, but then you start very quick, very fast. And as James mentioned, so the first prototype finished is only some days. Then you have testing, but you can start with the next one and the next one, so you can improve. And that is the interesting part.
So Markus, would you concur with all of this where
Fully agreed,
capture comes into play as well?
Fully agreed. Nothing.
So you,
I think the transparency bit, being very honest with your workforce is really important. And it depends on how you have that conversation. You know, if I go to this gentleman here and say, hi, I'm from the automation department. Could you just detail your job in nice, simple, easy steps so we could build a row? That's quite a scary conversation, you know. But educating people, you know, within those businesses so they understand the possibilities, I think covers a lot of that. The other big political thing that we have seen a lot is resistance from, apologies to the gentleman over there who works in IT, but we've seen historically a lot of resistance from IT departments because they have seen RPA as an existential threat because we're saying, look, you can deliver 80% of the outcome of this big transformation project using 10 or 20% of the resources. You know what? You might not need a DevOps department of 300 people anymore. You might instead want a robotics department of 40 or 50 people, and those other 250 people can go off and do something more productive. Because DevOps departments are an overhead. Think about what any business does. There are people who actually do stuff for the business and create an outcome, and then there's overhead. I think I'm overhead at this point. But whether you're DevOps or whether you're IT, all of you are there to service the rest of the business. And those people can feel threatened, and that's where you see politics coming in sometimes.
So, James, before you mentioned the ROI, and if I'm a customer, obviously, I want you to sell this to me, and I want to know what's my initial, let's say, my initial investment compared to the benefits. Obviously, ROI, the benefits can be measured on a reduction of headcount. Maybe there's compliance improvement of overall business processes and so on. What is usually, how do you compare this? And what's needed to be invested?
So again, it's how long is a piece of string. I've seen good projects where people have taken very much a self-serve approach. So I can't really comment on how much, on what the time has cost them. But in terms of dollar spend, you could do a good basic RPA project starting with maybe a few tens of thousands of dollars. And you'd expect to see a return on investment of that in months, not in 3-4 months rather than years. And if that return on investment wasn't
3-4 months.
Wow. Yes, absolutely. And if you weren't getting return on investment, a multiple of at least 3, 4, 5. So you spent $20,000. If you weren't getting back or making a saving or some benefit in some way of $50, $60, $80, $100,000, then you're probably doing something wrong. So an RPA project where you're spending $1 million and you're getting $1 million cost savings over a year, something's very wrong somewhere. A project where you're spending $1 million in year one and you're seeing maybe $3, $4 million benefit over the first 1 or 2 years, that sounds reasonable.
And do you also have any tools that you provide to your partners which allows them to show to their end user customers process improvement as an argument, or know your customers better, or your compliance becomes better, your accuracy becomes better?
So yes, we have tools we can provide around total cost of ownership. You know, because there are lots of bits.
Sure.
You know, it's not just here's the software, but what are the build costs? What about the infrastructure costs? And. But then looking at the benefits and trying to quantify some of those benefits in terms of cost savings, improvements in accuracy, improvements in morale, you know, unwanted attrition, all that good stuff. Yes, we have tools we can provide to our partners.
Yeah.
With that, as I say, we have it basically in this Enterprise Connect portal. Once the idea has just been captured, so somebody will just say, I think this is the right idea to automate. Then it comes to the COE expert who then validates it, gives an actual number. and you can then really map against the kind of FTEs or whatever you have saved. However, saying that, one thing that can't be just blind. So it's always easy to, measure how much FTEs you basically saved. But it's a portion of your work, and portion of your work. So, you got to think then how to, retransform your business. Secondly, what people don't do is they don't measure really the productivity. They don't measure what's the kind of impact of a failure of wrong entering data to the business. And if you had all this value, then you could also capture, the amount of cost you prevent by applying RPA. So it's really just a very narrow view, only to look at costs as the only measure. It's productivity, capacity, accuracy, so many factors that play a real role here. Yeah. And what we do in these immersion centers is kind of showing you where's the innovative idea in the whole transformation of the whole automation. Just, cost is one thing. If you get the right process, Bob's your uncle. You get really kind of, a huge saving. But if you then want to move forward, you need to have and see the whole holistic approach. Yeah. And that's something that I can only advise.
Can I give you a very quick example with some real numbers?
Please.
We're always very coy about who our customers are, numbers. So we did a lot of work in Big Pharma. And one of our Big Pharma customers, they were doing a lot of work around pharmacovigilance. So this is the process when you're developing a new drug or a new treatment. There's an awful lot of work you have to do in communicating with different stakeholders. So you've got the researchers, you've got the clinicians, you've got the primary health givers, you've got the patients themselves, you've got the regulators, and you have to give them different slices of information. And our customer found that with certain of these processes, where they were implementing RPA, they were able to turn these processes into end-to-end automated processes. In other words, there was no human involved at any point from when the process started to when the final outcome was delivered. What that did was reduce the audit burden that the regulators put on them. And their estimate for the cost savings, if you're a big pharma and you're being audited and a department's being audited, it costs lots of money. Their estimate for the year one cost savings was around $11 million US. Mm-hmm. They had saved as a direct, and that was in addition to all the other benefits they'd seen. So there's an example of a clearly identifiable, quantifiable benefit that was over and above what the other stuff they got around speed, accuracy, cost savings.
Or 500 million we did with a Japanese bank. But we have an interesting project actually in Thailand with Bridgestone, Fujitsu and UiPath where...
Maybe you want to speak about that? Or my question would also be, have you been using their tools for the measurement of these benefits?
Yes, we use the tools, definitely, but we have also developed our own tools. This is typical nature of it, but you can go to 10, 15 different vendors and you always see slightly different tools because always more or less the same questions. Some are more intelligent, some are a little bit stupid, but there are tools available on the market, more than enough. I don't want to talk about this Bridgestone case, but I want to talk about another case because James mentioned this large volume process, and I want to give you an idea of a very small process. It was just one process, 2 involved people, but we talked to this customer, we calculated a business case, and we have seen that we can reduce the complete workforce for this process. So 2 people are free. They are not fired. They are using to be customer first. They are on the hotline now, and the availability for the customers increased. And we saved with this platform the complete staff and earned 4 times the money. So it absolutely makes sense to go on these things with this just small processes also. Not only the big ones, but if you start with smalls, it comes naturally that it goes bigger, and then you are going to this 1 million, 2 million, 3 million cases.
Thank you. Obviously, an ROI depends also for the customer on the pricing model that you are choosing, and I guess there are different pricing models, whether this is transaction-based or based on business outcome, or is it based on a license for robot annually or perpetual? What is the usual pricing model, or maybe even connected to a delivery model? Maybe you, the vendors, want to answer that one.
For us, of course, the one entity is the robots. Depending, of course, on some of the technologies, we'll also look at how many documents are being processed, plus there's a base fee of the platform itself. Depending on the intelligence of the particular robots, to choose, there's different pricing. Different pricing on, is the robot attended with me on the desktop or in the back end? Similar.
So ours is basically the same as theirs, but cheaper.
That's a myth.
But no, annual, sorry, I couldn't resist. So annual license fees for the platform, for some of the document capture stuff, it's per page, more traditional capture models. But also then if you go and talk to some of our partners, some of our integration partners can be more flexible. So they'll offer managed services, more BPO type models. I think whatever you're trying to do, whatever your business model is, whatever you need the vendors to try and match, come and talk to us. The easy way to do RPA, there's only two things you need to do. You need to go and have a conversation with these guys. You need to come and have a conversation with us, talk to some of our partners as well, and then make a choice and get on with it.
So, really good. Subscription. We forgot about that. So agreed to what you have said, but a subscription is basically the model that these guys have implemented, and we are following that, of course, when it's about RPA installations.
Yeah. Yeah. So quickly, Valerie, we have how many minutes still? 0.
There's a big 0.
So basically, we are coming to an end. I'm not going to ask anymore in that case what is the future and the evolution of robotic process automation, although it would be very interesting to hear. First of all, gentlemen, I wanted to thank you for this lively conversation. It has been very informative. And is there any one or two last questions from the audience? Can you ask your question?
So the question is, what is limitations? What about limitations for RPA comparing with traditional BPM and integration?
So what are the imitations?
What are the limitations?
Limitations.
Limitations in what?
Particularly, what about security? What about security? Because when you have integration model, we have tested, we have documented it, everything works fine. What about integration?
We haven't got much time, so I'll try and answer that. And I think I can answer for both of us.
No, you can't.
So let's see how far I get. So when you're integrating at API level, you then have to retest because you may have put holes in your security and. The very simple answer is RPA typically interfaces at user interface level. So you're sitting on top of or within your existing security paradigm. It's replicating what a user does. So all of the checks and balances and pieces of security you have in place, whether you have a perimeter model or whatever, that stops a bad actor human doing bad stuff, will also stop a robot. So there is very, very little implication on security, which is one of the reasons why security departments typically like RPA solutions, because you're not putting big holes by going in API level.
So for the rest, I would suggest grab these specialists here during the coffee break. And again, let me just summarize. RPA is an extremely fast-growing market. Again, it's going to have a compound annual growth rate in the upcoming years, 30% or even more. Try to get into this market, whether you get an RPA partner yourself or collaborate with RPA solution providers. There's something to be earned. And I think you have heard all the different stories from what does it take to become an integrator, how do you identify, and you have heard some parameters, how long does it take just to make it testing and so further. So I'd like to thank you and also to you to your attention, and I hope you found it interesting.